Today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Deepak Chopra to discuss the We Are Never Alone film, directed by Michel Pascal, starring Gabriella Wright, a docudrama based on true stories. Hello, Deepak. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Nice to meet you. Thank you.
I'd love to ask, what inspired you to participate in this film about a mother losing her son to suicide?
Well, right now, suicide is the second most common cause of death among teenagers. It's a reflection on the fact that our humanity is incomplete. Last year, more people died from suicide in Japan than from COVID-19. Every 40 seconds, somebody is dying from suicide. In a way, it's a shame on our culture. So I think this film is an idea I think this film is an idea whose time has come. We need people to be aware of this pandemic, global pandemic. You can only change what you're aware of. So this film is about awareness.
Why do you think it's such a taboo and so difficult for our society to talk about this, given how prevalent it is?
It's called the hypnosis of social conditioning. When people dissociate mind from body, that's where it starts. So there's no stigma about physical disease, but there's stigma about mental distress. People are ashamed to admit that they're having mental problems. They feel inadequate. But if somebody has a hypertension or diabetes, they don't feel inadequate. The truth is, there's no event in the mind that doesn't have a reflection on the body, and vice versa. For 30 years, I've talked about the inseparability of mind and body. And today we have data actually that shows that anxiety, depression, and chronic physical illness go together. In fact, low-grade anxiety, low-grade depression, low-grade inflammation precede physical illness or the manifestation of physical illness, because inflammation is physical, but the overt manifestation of physical illness is preceded by several decades. Only 5% of disease-related gene mutations are fully penetrant, which means they guarantee the disease. The remaining 95% of chronic physical disease is, as I said, related to mental distress in the form of either anxiety or depression and other associated mental symptoms like hostility, guilt, shame, humiliation. And the totality of all these is expressed as severe depression. So on one end of the extreme, a person might have very low-grade anxiety, depression. On the other end of the spectrum is such desperation that the person wants to die. They don't find life worth living.
Yeah, it's really heartbreaking. Do you think that there's something that we could do to change this and move us in a better direction?
Well, that's why we have this film, to increase awareness. As I said before, if you're not aware of a problem, you can't solve it.
It starts there.
So everything starts with awareness.
Absolutely. And you've made appearances in a number of other films. So I'm curious, how is this different for you?
For me right now, this is a mission in life. Prevention of suicide, mental well-being, and on a bigger scale, looking at a world which is very distressed. War, terrorism, social injustice, gender injustice, climate change, pandemics, mental and physical. We need to reach a critical mass of awareness in the world so we can at least start a process for a more peaceful, just, sustainable healthier and joyful world. Joy is our essential state. When we lose joy, that means we are disconnected from life.
And you mentioned in the film that the only reality is consciousness. Can you elaborate on that a little bit for us, please?
Consciousness and awareness are the same thing. So there's consciousness, and then there are the contents of consciousness. The contents of consciousness are emotions, feelings, thoughts, perceptions, images, imagination, creativity. I like to think that the worst expression of imagination is anxiety and stress. The best expression of imagination is creativity, higher vision, and a calling. And in every moment you have a choice, either to choose stress, which is the perception of threat, and any kind of threat, physical, emotional, mental. Once you perceive threat, that leads to a whole cascade of events in our physical body. In fact, if I asked you right now to imagine something that you're concerned about, you could immediately see the effects on your device, whatever it is. These days we have all these devices, right? Yeah. Or Fitbit. Think of something that's bothering you right now and you'll see your heart rate variability change, you'll see your heart rate change, you'll see skin resistance change. Mm-hmm. Think of something that you're looking forward to and immediately you'll see the changes. So it's that dramatic when you perceive threat. And we live in a society that amplifies, exaggerates melodrama. Mm-hmm. And that's what sells in the media. So these days we don't even hear news, we only hear melodramatic opinion, and people aren't really talking about stories out there, they're talking about how they perceive what's happening out there. So whenever anybody writes a story, it's not about the topic, it's about themselves. They don't realize that. So in a way, this is a commentary on our media, on our social networks, and our society in general. And it's, if you want to know why, follow the money. Follow the money. More dramatic you paint distress, the more money you make.
More people are hooked.
So in a way, our society is driving distress.
It's true, even with social media as well, right?
It's all
a no thing
yeah.
to get people on, is to trigger people in different ways. As we talk about the power of creativity, you of course embarked on this creative venture with director Michel Pascal and actress Gabrielle Wright. What was it like working with them on this project?
I enjoyed working with Gabrielle Wright a lot. She's an amazing talent.
You seem to have created a very special bond that led to you both starting a platform,
it's
the Never
a movement.
Alone platform.
It's a global movement now, and I think we're not going to stop till we drastically reduce the number of people that are so desperate that they don't want to live anymore. Mm-hmm. And actually we're achieving results. We have, through the Chopra Foundation and the Never Alone movement, we've created a chatbot, an AI named after Gabriella's sister. PV was her nickname, and PV is now saving lots of lives. Every day we look at the data, and it's fascinating that people are more, that's another commentary on our society, that people are more comfortable talking to a machine than to a human being because they don't feel judged. In our society, immediately anything happens, there's judgment, there's labels, there's definitions, there's evaluation, there's stigma. And, as I said, this is the hypnosis of social conditioning driven by greed, anger, fear that is actually magnifying this pandemic.
I'm so grateful that this project has led to the movement, the Never Alone movement, and And I understand that not only are you giving people a safe place, but you're helping facilitate their healing. Can you elaborate a little bit more on this?
Yeah. When you're connected with life, by the way, you asked consciousness. What is consciousness? Consciousness, awareness, is that in which all experience occurs. It's that in which all experience is known, and ultimately all experience is made out of consciousness. So when we look at this movement, it's very clear that when people are connected, they feel empathy, which is they feel what the other person is feeling. Empathy leads to what is called compassion, which is the desire to alleviate suffering. And that leads to love in action, which is what this movement is about. Love in action. Eastern wisdom traditions call that karma yoga. The yoga of love. It's one of the 4 paths to what we call enlightenment. So when you feel connected, that's what happens. When you're disconnected, then you have anger and fear. Anger is the memory of trauma. Fear is the anticipation of trauma because of past. And then guilt is when you blame yourself for it, and guilt leads to shame and humiliation. And the combination of all of the above leads to depression, which ultimately leads to not wanting to live.
You are here at Life is Beautiful to speak about this, and with an audience of millennials and young people, the demographic who are largely being affected by this. What is your hope and their takeaway from you sharing this message with them?
We want to see a world driven by compassion and not by fear. And young people who are inspired to be part of this movement will ultimately become our global ambassadors for healing, which is the return of the memory of wholeness. That's the word. Healing, health, wholeness is coming back to our starting point, who we really are. And who we really are conscious beings with self-awareness that can not only heal ourselves but heal others. When we heal others through attention, which means deep listening, affection, which is deep caring, appreciation, which is deep gratitude, and acceptance, not trying to change the other because it's hard enough to change ourselves, that leads to healing.
It's beautiful. As these ambassadors of this movement, in addition to sharing compassion and deep listening, what else do you think that people can do and inspire others to do? We're talking about creating awareness. Do you think that there's some value in possibly starting a campaign of people sharing their stories?
Yeah, to be human is to have a story. Unfortunately, all the stories we hear today are about trauma because trauma is almost universal. There is no family that is not affected by suicide or addiction. Addiction is an escape also from addressing trauma. So ultimately there's, the more we think about this, there is no mental solution to mental distress because the mind is the source of all problems. There are only spiritual solutions. And when I say spiritual solutions, people say, what is spirituality? There's one word that describes spirituality: self-awareness. But people don't know who their self is. They confuse their self with their selfie, their self-image, which is what our society propagates.
Yeah.
Everybody is looking for validation, approval. But if we actually get in touch with our deeper self, you really discover you don't need to be validated and you don't need to cancel anybody else's story.
I think that's so key, is reminding ourselves and each other that we have that ability, that power to shift things, that we aren't at the mercy of what society is makes us feel pressured to fall into.
Society and culture are a projection of our collective consciousness. So, in a way, the individual person is the download of the matrix of collective thought. In fact, nobody has an original thought anymore. It's recycling through social media. So that creativity is gone because people are like bundles of conditioned reflexes and nerves that are constantly being triggered by people and circumstance into predictable outcomes. We've become biological robots, and we have lost the ability to get in touch with that part of ourselves which is the source of insight, of inspiration, a new imagination, a higher calling, and transcendence. We've lost that capacity.
Do you have any suggestions on what else we could do to get back in touch with them?
We need that critical mass of people who aspire to transform themselves from being separate, fragmented, conditioned minds to whole mind. The word whole, holy, and wholeness are the same thing. So healing is the return of the memory of wholeness.
Wow. Very powerful message. And as people are invited to see the film, you of course are showing the trailer today at Life is Beautiful, and I heard it will be premiering the actual film at the Asian World Film Festival coming up in November. What do you hope for people to take away from the film?
Well, I hope when they watch the film, they're moved emotionally to take action and become part of this global movement for healing.
Love it. And what would be a specific call to action that you would encourage people to take?
First, check out the website, neveralone.love. Participate, have conversations with Pee-wee, and if possible, make a contribution, financial or otherwise. Join this movement.
Absolutely. And you think that it would be also great if someone has a personal story to share about this?
Yeah,
too.
Personal stories are very useful. Right now, people are sharing their stories with Pee-wee.
Yeah. What do you think about them maybe posting on their social media, using social media as a way to share this message, and maybe hashtagging Never Alone? Do you think that would be beneficial?
I think that's a brilliant idea for people to hashtag neveralone.love.
I love that. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with us. I look forward to hearing people's responses to the film and how this impacted them, and supporting this movement with you.
Thank you. Joy is the only measure of well-being. Otherwise, life is not worth living. You can have all the money in the world. If you're not joyful, what's the point?
Yeah, that's very true.
Look at a baby, spontaneously joyful.
What do you think we could do to get back to that place?
Go back to your innocence. Innocence is the key. It's not a mental thing. In fact, you have to go past the dark alleys and the ghost-filled attics and get in touch with the innocence that you were.
That's beautiful.
Innocence heals.
It's beautiful. And as we're talking about how this has impacted so many people, do you have any personal experience in your circle?
Yeah, as I said, every family is affected. So my family has been affected, extended family, by depression and even suicide.
And how do you think we can better support each other when we learn of a family member or a friend who's been impacted by this?
I mentioned the 4 A's: attention, affection, appreciation, acceptance. If you just practice those every day with everyone that you meet, you will be healed and you will heal others. The fastest way to be happy is to make somebody else happy.
A very special thank you to Virgin Hotels Las Vegas for hosting us to have this meaningful conversation about the We Are Never Alone film and the Never Alone movement and platform. Be sure to go to neveralone.love to learn more.
I was embarking on a story that would change my life forever. A story of how I overcame the story itself.
Honey?
I ran to him and
Can you hear me? Oh no.
I tried to feel his heartbeat and
No, yes.
there was nothing there.
Every 40 seconds, someone dies by suicide. I am a meditation teacher for the parolees in Los Angeles at Amity Foundation. Of course, at the beginning, we don't realize that life's going to change. It's just not possible. He was perfect at school. His teachers said that he was so focused, concentrated.
When did I really start to disconnect from life? Stop loving my life? I don't remember exactly when.
Why is it happening more today? I think increasingly people are feeling alienated from themselves.
I didn't feel you in the beginning, but now I feel you. Was I not a good mom?
The more you breathe, the more you will feel my presence next to you.
When someone takes their life, they're in a spiritual crisis. They don't feel like they belong here anymore. They feel like they're alone.
Why has no clear answer. Why do we exist? Why does the universe exist?
Mom, you were so beautiful, but I was secretly crying in my corner. That was my secret garden.
I'm like, oh my God.
If you stay alive, then he stays alive. And everything that you loved about him, everything, you be that. Every quality, every emotion, every moment, you be that.
Celebrity has removed wisdom and compassion from the throne of life.
We have to put compassion and wisdom back. You never decide from your lowest tier of emotionality.
Doctor, do you think he was mentally ill? Was it something that I didn't see with his Tibetan passion and obsession?
Yes, I think that he's really telling you the answer.
Suicide is the second most common cause of death amongst children and teens from the age of 5 to 35. Support this film. Support this world movement for prevention of suicide and mental health. All together, we can change the world.